Well, good morning. This is Brother Chad Long from Delhi Baptist Church, and we are at the end of Philippians. We're in chapter 4. Today and tomorrow should pretty well wrap it up, Lord willing, but just depends on how bogged down we get. I'm trying not to make these videos too long. In fact, they were 10 to 15 minutes and they've grown to 20, so I apologize for that. But I'll be honest with you, we had a good day in the Lord yesterday. I was very, very thankful to fellowship with our believers, and we had a nice turnout yesterday morning. But last night was wonderful too. I really enjoyed being a part of our church and our community. The devil tries to get me down and get me discouraged because I look at these videos later and 6 or 7 views maybe all we get, and some videos get no views. And the devil says, well, Chad, why are you doing all this? Nobody's watching this. Nobody cares. The only people watching it are the people who are already faithful and love the Lord, and you're not helping anybody. Well, I didn't set out to be the person doing this anyway. I'm trusting the Lord, and you never know when somebody will come along later. Maybe, if the Lord tarries 2-3 years from now and stumbles upon these videos, because they're there for anybody. People in Africa can watch these videos. I mean, wherever you're at, you don't have to be anywhere near Texas to see them. Now, how they get shuffled around and found, I don't really understand. There's some kind of an algorithm where the name of the video will get lumped in with other videos of similar content, and so if someone looking for a devotional series can stumble upon them. But I really don't know how all that works. I just know that I felt led to do this, and if God wanted me to do it, even if it's for 6 people, I'm going to do it. So I don't let that get me down. We used to sing a song, down in the dumps I'll never go, that's where the devil keeps me low. And it's good that that came up this morning, because it really does. It fits with where we're going. So let's get into our lesson, our devotional study, and let's see what Paul has to say as he closes out this letter to Philippi. This is the last chapter. He's been trying to finish since chapter 3, verse 1, where he said, finally. He's been trying to wind it down and land the plane. But we get to chapter 4, and I've already read to you the first couple of verses regarding the women who were evidently not speaking, not on good terms. So I won't reread those. You can go back to our last devotional if you want to hear about that. I will reread verse 3 just to kind of segue into it. He says, I entreat thee also, true yoke fellow, help those women which labored with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and with other my fellow laborers whose names are in the book of life. So it's a plea to help with not just those women, but problems in the church, and with people who have a track record of being helpers in the growth of the church and in the work and business of the church, and with spreading the gospel. And I would entreat our church to do the same. Let's work together. Let's try to pull together during these times and help one another, communicate with one another. We have some people we've not seen for a while. I don't know if they'll come back. I don't know if we'll be back where we were, completely strong and healthy as we were when all this hit. We may lose some folks. We may gain some. I don't know what's going to happen. There may be some people who don't like the way I handled the crisis, and may find a place that's more fitting for them, and that's their prerogative. But I hope people will see that in all of this, I'm trying to honor God. This is not about lifting myself up. It never was. I don't think I'm anything anyway. So anyway, Paul asks for, he entreats for some help with problems, and we have problems too, and we need the same help. But I love the next verse. Like I said, down in the dumps I'll never go. That's where the devil keeps me low. Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. This is a directive. Some would even call it a commandment to the church. I'm not going to go that far. But it is a directive. It's something that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to radiate joy. Uh, Very little bothers me as much as seeing a Christian, someone who claims to know the Lord, whose soul has been saved, whose life is supposed to reflect Jesus Christ, whose face doesn't apparently know it. I mean, you meet some folks who claim to be Christians and it looks like they've been sucking on sour lemons. They used to call that the bitter beer face, but Christians aren't supposed to be drinking beer anyway. The point is, it just makes your face look, I can't even frown that big, so I'm not going to attempt to illustrate. But I know you've seen these people, they just don't look like they're happy. And there's plenty to be down about. I get that. There's plenty to let bother you. I've got a friend who's, seems to stay in a mode of depression here lately, and I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. It happened to Elijah. It's happened to me, but we're supposed to try to radiate joy in all that we do. I cannot stress this enough. The word rejoice literally means to revisit your joy. So when you don't feel like rejoicing, revisit something joyous, and it needs to be some experience that you've had in the Lord. The best one is your salvation. Revisit your salvation. Revisit the time when you accepted Christ as your Savior, and that'll give you something to rejoice about. But if you have something more recent the Lord's done in your life, revisit that. Think about that. Focus on that. Focus on the wonderful things that God has done for us. Maybe a particular storm He brought us through. Maybe a sickness or an ailment or a financial problem that the Lord brought you through. And if you think about those things, you should be able to revisit the joy in that moment, and it ought to cause you to rejoice. He says, rejoice always. Not about secular things. He says, rejoice in the Lord. So let's make sure that the things we're rejoicing about are in the Lord. Always. And again, I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Now this is an interesting verse, because what I think he means is be careful what you get up in the air about. I have a habit, and I was telling my friend Eric this last night. I have a habit sometimes of getting frustrated with technical things. We had a camera yesterday that quit playing. Now I know why, and we fixed it, but I thought I'd fixed it Wednesday when it happened. Now, technical things drive me bananas because I'm not a technical guy. I'm more of a hands-on, face-to-face, person-to-person type. And if you come at me with things that I can deal with, I handle them very well. I'm calm, collected. I don't get real upset. And if I do, I don't show it. I handle most things quite well. But when it comes to technical problems, I get to a level sometimes where I want to throw a phone or a video camera or a computer, something that I'm not great with. They get under my skin. And I don't know why. I've got to work on that. Well, moderation here means the things that we do. Be careful what things that we get, really overly excitable about, because some people do this in their Christian walk. They'll let little things just mess them up. They get all upset about a particular doctrinal statement that someone makes, or I don't want to give too many examples of this, because I may accidentally stumble on something that bothers you. But just know that it's okay to have strong feelings about what we believe in the Lord. It is, and we're supposed to teach doctrinal things. But just because I may disagree with a particular preacher in a couple of areas doesn't mean it's worth getting all upset about. Moderation here just means to try to be calm and try to trust the Lord. And you're going to see as we move into the next verse what he's actually saying here. So bear with me here. But let your moderation be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. And he's not talking about the tribulation period. He's talking about Well, one of two things. Either he's talking about the fact that the Lord's with us, he's right on hand, he's in our hearts and walking with us, or the fact that he hoped and believed that possibly the rapture was soon for him. I choose to believe the former. I think that the Lord is at hand just meant that he's with us through these things, everything that we do, and he's watching us. So let's let our moderation be known. And he says, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known unto God. Now this verse sometimes gets misunderstood or misconstrued or not studied deep enough. Let me make it simpler. Be careful for nothing means to don't worry about anything and pray about everything. That's literally what verse 6 means. Rather than reread all that, let me just tell you what I believe the Lord is saying here. Don't get up in the air. Remember, let your moderation be known. Don't let things get you all out of proportion. Don't sit and worry over things. And again, I worry over technical problems, but typically if I just take a breath and look at it, I can figure it out, or I can get somebody to help me figure it out. We're not supposed to get all kinds of worked up over these things. We're not supposed to worry over them. The Lord will work it out. You know, it'll be okay. It's not something we've got to flip out about. And I'm talking to myself there, but just don't worry about everything, but pray about everything. If there's something you worry about on a scale of 1 to 10 that's at a 2, pray about it. If there's something you're worried about on a scale of 1 to 10 that's at a 9, pray about it. But either way, don't sit worrying about it. Just give it to God. Give it all to Him. He's going to take care of it. And if it's something that needs direct attention, He knows that too. He says, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. In other words, when you don't worry about it and you trust the Lord with it and you pray about everything, He'll give you a certain peace. It may not be the answer you're looking for, but it is a calming effect that says to you, I've got it. I'm going to handle it. It's in my hands. And that's the peace that passes all understanding, is knowing that even though the horizon is scary, God sees all things and He's got it under His control. I'm going to move on, but before I do, that statement reminds me of the servant that was with Elisha in the little hut. If you're not familiar with this, it's somewhere near 2 Kings 6, but I don't remember exactly. But there's a story there where Elisha is in a little house or cottage or whatever it is. His servant's with him, and they're surrounded by Syrians. And the servant's freaking out. He's like, don't you see that army out there on the hill? You know, they're surrounding us, man. And Elisha makes a statement. He says, I'm not worried. Those that be with us are more than those that be with them. And this servant's thinking, okay, this guy's on drugs. We're outnumbered by Syrians. How can who's with us be more than those that are out there? And Elisha, knowing that this servant didn't have that kind of faith and couldn't see from the heart the way that God is with him, just prayed and asked the Lord to reveal to him what God had already revealed to Elisha, which was a host of heavenly angels armed to the teeth and surrounding the Syrians. Now, because they were heavenly bodies, they can't be seen with the naked eye unless God permits it. But the servant couldn't see that, and Elisha prayed, and God allowed the servant to get a glimpse of the heavenly host that was there and taking care of things, and he wasn't scared anymore. Well, we don't have to see all that to know that when we give it to God, that He'll give us a peace that passes all understanding and let us know that He's got it all in His hands. And those that be with us are more than they that be with Him. Remember this, and I'll move on. Only a third of the angels fell to this earth to support Satan and his agenda. So 2/3 of the angels that are left, and that's assuming God doesn't decide to create more. He can do what He wants. But just if He left the status quo, Satan's outnumbered 2 to 1. Not to mention us, when we get to be with the Lord in our new bodies, we make an army in and of ourselves once we join the Lord. And better than that, if you think God needs any one of us to defeat Satan and all of those that Satan has with him, that God created in the first place, then you've misunderstood the power of God. He's got more angels and he's got us. He doesn't need one of us. Our God doesn't need to lift a finger to defeat Satan and his little group of misfits. I'm not a bit scared of Satan. I would be if I didn't know Jesus, but I'm not a bit scared of him. Paul says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. There's some qualifiers in that verse. Okay? There's some qualifiers. He lists the things that are qualifiers, but he goes on to say, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise. Let me put that a little more simply, but clearly. There are a lot of books out there. There's a lot of theologians, a lot of people you can study after, study Bibles, commentaries. I don't trust all of them. I trust some. There's just some I really like. I like just about anything by John R. Rice, Dr. Vernon McGee, or some others. But even them I take with a grain of salt. I like David Jeremiah. I like a lot of people. I'm not going to sit and name them all. But if you really look, you can find errors with anyone. You can find errors with me. I make errors all the time. I make statements that I didn't really mean the way that I said them. I misread some things. I misunderstand some things. I'm human. And I'm not one that's in a position to judge these great men of God who've gone on before me. But here's what I want you to know. Paul has been trying to say, don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Trust the Lord. Let him give you peace. And if you need something to help cheer you up in addition to all of that, then focus on these things that are honest, these things that are just, these things that are pure, these things that are lovely, these things that are of good report. And if they have virtue in them, if there's something that's praiseworthy, study on those things. So if you can find a commentary honestly, the Bible's number one. You ought to just go to the Bible, but it's okay to read some Christian men who have some uplifting things. Just make sure that they fit those qualifiers, those criteria that were given by God. If they don't have those characteristics, then they're not trustworthy, and we can be misled, and we'll have reason to be down. I'll give you a quick example, and I'll move on. There's some material out there by people like Joel Osteen, and I'm not saying they're bad people, but they're ear ticklers, and they can lead you astray by getting you focused on monetary gain or spirit or physical blessings, and a whole lot of the things God promised us are for beyond this place. While he can bless us here too, that's not his immediate focus. His focus here is to win folks to him, to spread the gospel and see people saved. So I'm not going to pick on a lot of different people that I may disagree with. I just want you to understand, when you're looking at these things, to measure them against the Word of God, and not how good they may make you feel, but if they measure up to the Lord, and you're trying to do right for the Lord, he will give you that peace of mind, and he will help you through whatever you're going through. He says in verse 10, and I'll stop here, but I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me hath flourished again, wherein you were also careful, but you lacked opportunity. Now this is a reference to how God takes care of Paul, even when some of the churches were not able. The church at Philippi was beginning to be persecuted, and they had not been as faithful in their giving and taking care of people, particularly Paul, but not just Paul. He was a missionary they supported, and there were times when they couldn't support him. And he's trying to give an example. He's not complaining about, and he's going to go on to explain this after this. We'll talk about it, Lord willing, tomorrow. But what he's trying to get at is, God has given me peace. He's given me things to reflect upon that give me cause to rejoice. And not just when money comes my way, not just when there's support or visitors or letters. Even in those bad days, even in those low times, God is taking care of me. And so anyway, that's a good place to stop for today. We'll pick up there tomorrow, try to finish the chapter either tomorrow or the next day. But I pray that I've given you something to think about, something to rejoice about. And remember the words of Paul. Rejoice always. And again, I say rejoice. God bless you, and I love you.